o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and start. So welcome to the 12-step Big Book Workshop. My name is Lisa, and I am a student of the 12 Steps Method of Recovery. My focus fellowships are CODA, Al-Anon, and OA. I'm really glad you guys are back for another fantastic opportunity to take a look at your sex inventories. And just a reminder, we won't be here next week and the following week, but I'll send you an email reminder, but just to share something. It seems like it's coming up quick. So please join me in the set-aside prayer with the willingness and the desire to have an open mind, an open heart, with the gift of honesty, and as we tackle the fourth step to release us from our source of our fear and anxiety regarding our sex inventories. So God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my step 4, and my sexual behaviors, so that I may have a new experience with my step 4, my anger, fear, sexual integrity, and especially with you. All right, so still on step 4, believe it or not. So we're talking about identifying and analyzing. And we are identifying and analyzing the obstacles that we have inside of us to the extent that it is inside of us. Step 4 literally says it is a moral inventory. We have to remember it's about morals. And the definition of moral is a principle or standard of right and wrong, and can also refer to the lesson of a story, as in a moral story. As an adjective, moral describes behavior that aligns with these principles or a person with good character. When we looked at resentments, the fruit of the root is self-centeredness. We looked at values, but in a very specific way. We also looked at our beliefs in column 3, and then our motives in column 4, and we saw that our beliefs were delusional and our motives are corrupt. And that's not a judgment, it's an evaluation. If the lens through which we are looking at the world is distorted, our beliefs are going to be distorted too. We will see what we see as distorted because our lenses are distorted. It is not because we have something wrong with our brain or something wrong with our character. It is our perceptions. It is not what we're looking at. It's because we're the ones looking at it. So resentment, as we have learned, is the re-experiencing over and over again of past slights or injustices, whether real or perceived. And these can build up over time from accumulated feelings of anger, disappointment, frustration that hasn't been addressed. So we addressed our resentments by analyzing them and praying for the removal, and also for the removal of our deep resentments. Hopefully you are seeing a little bit of improvement with the analysis of column 3 and 4 by also using the prayer. If not, your resentments will soon begin to lose their hold on you, certainly, as you continue this practice. And by the time you've completed probably your 5th step, you'll see a difference. But the more you understand the way we work and the way we went through these evaluations, the more you're going to be inclined not to repeat those patterns and those behaviors, because you're starting to understand how you work. The next piece of recovery we addressed was in our fears inventory. Anger being the survival mechanism of fight and fear, the survival mechanism of flight or flee, which are fairly new, and you are probably still learning and understanding your fears and anger or resentments. But we're still in step 4, so this step is the whopper. Once we get through this, you're going to feel like you're just coasting. So don't give up, no matter what. And tonight, we'll be looking at the survival mechanism of sex. Sexual reproduction is a survival mechanism for our species, as it increases genetic diversity, helping populations adapt to environmental changes and resist diseases. Bill identified the need for sexual relations as one of humanity's powerful natural instincts, alongside the needs for emotional and material security and social approval and acceptance. He characterized these as essential aspects of human nature, not just a bare survival mechanism in the most basic of senses. When the natural desire for sex, security, or prestige becomes a controlling demand or an unhealthy dependency, it creates emotional disturbances and blocks the person's spiritual progress. When sexual behaviors are based in dishonesty, they will fall into the category of freeze or fight. There are a lot of other things that we can look at in regards to dishonesty, secrets, guilt, and shame, but that'll come later. You may have started the work of asking the questions that you have around the sex inventory, and then we can finish up the fourth step finally. Although we will move on to the fifth step as a class, but just because you have been given the instructions on the fourth step, you may not be finished with your own fourth step by that time, and that's okay. It's not unusual for people to be in different places with their own work, especially if this is your first time doing this. There's people in the workshop that have done it repeatedly. So wherever you're at, that's exactly where you should be. Do not worry about it. So try to have an idea on how you plan on finishing the fourth and fifth step, which I think over the next 4 or 5 months is very achievable to finish up probably around March. So that gives you a little gauge as to where you want to go with this. And steps 6 and 7 go relatively quickly. Then you'd have time easily to complete steps 8 and 9. We want to plan so that we are setting a goal and achieving it, but even more importantly, we want to complete it. There's no pressure or expectation, just a friendly suggestion that you have a plan for completion. And it's always easier to complete it while we're still doing the workshop so that if any questions come up or concerns, you can bring it to the group. So we're looking at page 68 and we're looking at the sex inventory. It says in the last paragraph, now about sex, many of us needed an overhauling there, but above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. So there are 2 primary themes on the next page and a half, next page and a half concerning the sex inventory. The first theme is common sense, that middle ground of balance. The second theme is that the only criteria for your behavior is you within relationship with your higher power. That's where your criteria comes from. You're not going to get it out of a book from someone else or anything. It's going to be between you and your maker. So it's a pretty simple formula. We'll go into this more with some very specific instructions on page 69. So still on page 68, he continues with, it is so easy to get way off the track. And here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes. So Bill is using this as a learning opportunity to coach us and counsel us to walk the middle path of common sense. And I'm going to describe the outer limits on both sides, but it's really a good idea. Instead of being that extremist that we've been, it's either, too high or too low, try to find the middle ground. On page 88, Bill said, here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes, perhaps. One set of voices cries that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. So that negative outlook of culture, that belief that sex is a bad thing, and Bill is talking back in the 1920s and 1930s, so he was in a different era than we are now. The sexual environment of the roaring 1920s was characterized by a public sexual revolution with changing social norms like flapper culture and increased sexual expression, driven by factors like automobiles and birth control, which allowed for more premarital sexual activity. I mean, imagine being in this time when cars are just being developed. However, this shift was often contradicted by societal pressures, like the fear of damaged reputations and the ultimate goal of marriage. And the sexual environment of the 1930s was heavily impacted by the Great Depression, which diminished focus on romance and sexual expression due to widespread economic hardship. On page 68, he says, one set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then on the other side, he says on page 69, then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage. This is when the whole idea of open sexuality and freedom became very prominent in society, as they were coming out of the roaring 20s and sliding into the Great Depression. He continues, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sexual causes. And some people still believe that. On page 69, he says, they think we do not have enough of it or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow man no flavor for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. So Bill's talking about the two excesses as he sees it from his vantage point of writing in 1939. Remember who Bill was when he wrote the big book and what the timing was like. He says, we want to stay out of this controversy. By we, he means Alcoholics Anonymous. The 12-step culture that Bill is speaking for is the fellowship at that point. And now he's going to tell us that what the suggestion is from the viewpoint of the 12-step fellowship with regard to sex. And he says, we want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sexual conduct. AA, the 12-step fellowship, and any legitimate 12-step fellowship that follows the spirit of AA has no opinion whether heterosexual, homosexual, celibate, no opinion, monogamous, polygamous, all the different ones. I don't even know them all anymore. No opinion. This is not what this step is about. But you do as an individual, just like with what we looked at in anger and in fear. In anger, looking at our beliefs and motives, we look at what's deep down inside of us, our principles in fear. What's deep inside of us in terms of our self-reliance versus our trust principles. So Bill suggests that we find our principles, or if we don't have them, that we identify principles that we want to attain. We strive to be decent human beings, at least by our own standards. Take note that this desire to be decent is coming from the inside of us, not from our culture or our religious traditions, not from AA or our spouse. It's coming from deep inside of us, not from outside of us. He says, we all have sexual problems. We would hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? Now he's going to do a deep dive into the instructions, which are like the fear instructions, straightforward and simple. It requires very little analysis. So here we have, and I believe I sent these to you guys, these sex inventory worksheets. It's really just observations and asking questions and answering them. Simple questions. We reviewed our own conduct over the past years. Much like the resentment and fears inventory, we're doing an inventory of our sexual behaviors. You want to go back to your earliest consciousness of your own sexual behavior as an adult and ask yourself, what kind of behaviors developed out of your sexual discoveries? If you have already done a prior sex inventory, you don't need to go back to the beginning of your discovery phase again. The exception being that if by the time we finish with the Big Book workshop, you realize you did not do your prior inventory this way, then you may want to go back and review your sex history since adulthood, which can vary between individuals. You can be 50 and not an adult yet, but really the time to consider is after 18 years old or so. This isn't about, 10 years old and playing doctor with your next door neighbor or whatever, a kissing cousin they call them, whatever they are. This is about adult sexual behavior. But what constitutes an adult? A lot of us would consider ourselves to be what Freud created, known as the king baby syndrome. Countless people worldwide struggle with various self-inflicted challenges, with alcohol addiction and drug addiction be the most well-known. As inherently imperfect beings, many of us face the aftermath of decisions that can spiral into addiction. While most addictions often evoke sympathy due to their usually tragic backstories, there is one particular condition known as king baby syndrome that elicits far less compassion, and it is for you to judge whether that is right or wrong. The term king baby probably doesn't sound very formal and almost has a comedic ring to it, but king baby is actually a professionally acknowledged term describing a very unfortunate condition in which the person displays self-centered, selfish, childlike qualities through adult life. There are usually very good reasons for a person to develop king baby, stemming from experiences during their formative years. We probably all know a few king babies, especially if we're not one ourselves. So the sex inventory can be life-altering for many addictive people. We are that king baby sitting in our high chair, banging the tray, saying, I want more, more, more. The typical scenario of most addicts, where more is never enough. One is too many, and a million will never be enough. Each time we do an inventory, we become more aware as we go deeper and deeper to reveal what is below that surface. Bill says, we reviewed our own conduct over the past years. So we take a look at our past behaviors and we make our list, just like we did with resentments and fears. If it helps you recall your history, you can do it in increments such as by year, decade, or age, however it's easiest for you. So this is not going to be a long list. It is just about having a list. And if you have had a highly active sexual life, you will actually see that many of the situations are basically the same. One-night stands, bar hookups, weekend flings, short-term relationships, long-term relationships. If you have had several of them, are you scrolling Match.com? Are you on Tinder or Bumble? So let's say you have had several long-term relationships. You would likely see at the end of the inventory that the dynamics were pretty much identical. The circumstances and time frames might have been different, but all the people would easily be interchangeable because the dynamic was always the same. It's just a different face. The really active people might want to split it up into categories such as office hookups, a list of office hookups, a list of neighborhood dalliances, online, one-night stands, relationships before marriage, and maybe even relationships during marriage. So if you have an extensive sex life, you're just going to have to put a little more effort into the way you put it all down on paper. So there are 9 questions to answer. And once you have answered the 9 questions on perhaps 10 separate situations, take 10 relationships or 10, running off to Vegas or whatever it is. They're all going to be different situations. You'll have a complete picture. It may be that you decide to do 10 more or 20 or 30 more. I can't even believe I'm using these numbers, but they're real numbers. Depending on your own prayer practice and your own inclination, just like the resentments inventory, you will do 10 column 3s and 4s on different people, and you got it. You thoroughly analyzed 10 different fears, and you got your pattern. It's the same with the sex inventory. So, if you've had 100 sexual experiences, you don't have to do 100 of these inventories. Because as I said, they're going to start looking very familiar and very comparable to each other. And I'm not minimizing what you'll need to do. Not at all. This work is very sacred. But first, ask yourself, how free do I want to be? Don't minimize it, but at the same time, don't exaggerate it. It's not necessary. And do we have any perfectionists out there? Probably at least half of us are. You need to scratch by being too excessive. It's not healthy and it's not necessary. We don't have to go to that degree. A sex inventory is primarily a relationship inventory and a review of your personal conduct, not just a list of partners or sexual acts. The number of partners is not the primary focus. Instead, you should examine your behavior patterns, motivations, and the impact of your actions on yourself and others. Understand the purpose. The goal is to identify recurring patterns of behavior. Understand your motivations, as for an example, seeking validation, escaping loneliness. Assess your respect for boundaries and evaluate the emotional consequences of your actions, such as guilt, shame, and regret. This helps you shape a sound and sane ideal for your future sex life. Reflect on your history and attitudes by considering your earliest memories and experiences with sex and relationships. Examine how your upbringing or past experiences, including potential abuse, influence your views on sex. Identify any unhealthy attitudes, such as feeling sex is a duty, a way to gain power, or a secretive act. So let's take a look at the questions. There are separate questions for separate words, even though the words are in one sentence. So each word has their own sentence now, which is why there are 9 questions. And the sentences are on page 69. So where had I been selfish? I stop and ask the first question. On page 62, Bill has already said selfishness, self-centeredness is the root of the problem. We have seen this in other fourth step slides, and the fruit of the root is resentment, fear, and dishonesty, as represented in sex, and then some other things thrown in there. But then there is a second word in that sentence. It's dishonesty. So where have I been dishonest, either by omission or commission? And this refers to identifying specific instances of dishonesty in your sexual and romantic life, such as lying, manipulating, withholding information, or acting deceptively. It also includes a broader sense of dishonesty, like being inauthentic or not being your true self with a partner and not upholding your own personal integrity. This inventory is designed to reveal past behaviors and to understand the patterns of your actions, helping you to avoid future harm in your future relationships. Number 3, where had I been inconsiderate? In the sex inventory, where have I been inconsiderate refers to the way a person's relationship conduct has been selfish, dishonest, or careless, causing harm to others. This includes actions that have hurt, manipulated, or caused jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness in others. And it prompts the individual to identify their faults and determine what they should have done and didn't. Whom had I hurt? Number 4. The question is a direct prompt to identify specific individuals who were harmed by your actions and to detail the nature of that harm. It forces a critical look at the character defects that led to the harmful actions, such as selfishness, fear, or thoughtlessness. It helps you see the consequences of your actions, which can be a motivator for change and for living a more loving and honest life in the future. Very much like the resentment inventory, where the 8th step says, we make a list of the people harmed. We did so when we took our inventory. Not only does it give us a perspective on the sex behavior, but it also helps us begin to complete our 8th step list that will be coming up. Number 5, did I arouse jealousy? Bill's saying, did I arouse jealousy, means examining if your actions or words made another person feel mental uneasiness from suspicion or fear, or rivalry, unfaithfulness, etc. It prompts a self-reflection on whether you intentionally or unintentionally invoke jealousy in a partner to gain, retain, or protect something, or if you were unfaithful. This is part of a process of identifying harm and shaping a healthier future in relationships by acknowledging mistakes and planning for different behaviors. The inventory uses a specific definition of jealousy as mental uneasiness from suspicion or fear of rivalry, unfaithfulness, etc., vigilance in maintaining or guarding something. Number 6, did I arouse suspicion? Well, did I arouse suspicion means examining whether your actions or words had the intention to make another person feel distrust, suspicious, or fear of rivalry. It is a self-reflection question to identify behavior that was selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate, causing unease and mistrust in relationships as part of a process to build healthier future relationships. Number 7, did I arouse bitterness? When Bill W. asks, did I arouse bitterness, he is asking if your actions or words were sarcastic, mean, or selfish, leading to feelings of resentment, anger, or bitterness in another person, particularly a partner. This part of the sex inventory is about taking honest stock of your role in creating an unpleasant or difficult situation and identifying if your behavior caused harm. It encourages self-reflection on the underlying character defects, such as ego, anger, or self-pity, that may have contributed to the bitterness. Number 8, where was I at fault? Where was I at fault means looking honestly at one's own behavior in relationship to identify where one's actions caused harm, regardless of the other person's behavior. It requires self-reflection to see your own mistakes, not just the fault of others. This is about personal responsibility. It isn't about blaming the other person. It's an internal question designed to help you see your own role in any negative outcomes in your relationships. And if you'll notice, the last few slides I'm showing, we're not really even talking about sex. We're talking about relationships in general, because they do kind of go together. That it's going to be 2 for 1 shot. And this is the big question at the bottom, which is number 9. What should I have done instead? And all of those are preparatory in the beginning in anticipation of the final question. What should I have done instead? The question prompts a person to clearly define what they should have done instead of what they did. For example, if the inventory reveals anger, the person should write down that they should have instead been loving, kind, or patient. When the phrase, what should I have done instead, is used in the sex inventory, it refers to identifying and writing down the ideal, higher power directed behavior to replace the faults revealed in our sex inventories. It's not about dwelling on mistakes with remorse, but about honestly comparing past actions with a higher standard and envisioning a new, ethical, and unselfish approach for our future relationships. So, what's the point? The point is to become a more conscious person going forward. This is not about judging our behaviors as our younger self by our current age and consciousness. This is an evaluation. If the same circumstances that were presented to you at 20 were then presented to you at 50 with some sobriety and recovery in your pocket, how would you want to behave now? The question is, what should I have done instead? And honestly, we couldn't have done anything differently than we have already done. We cannot change one of the actions from early addiction to now. We can't have changed any of those actions because we had no awareness. We didn't know because we didn't know. It wasn't even on our radar screen, not a single blip. This is not a get out of jail free card either, and there is no cutting of any slack. It is about not taking on the burden of guilt and shame for the decades of mischief and wrong turns. But today, I do want to learn from them. You could ask yourself today, with your current level of consciousness, if the same situation were presented to you, would you do what you did in the past again? Same situation, same response, or not? So, consciousness means to be aware of and to know with new knowledge what is the point of question number 9. Bill suggests later on that we create our sex ideal from this material. It's already down on paper, and we just need to look at it again. This is not a thinking exercise or something to have a chat about. It is a writing exercise, a discovery of sorts, put to pen and paper for all 3 inventories. And they're going to compile into something else. They're not just there of their own volition. It's going to be something more. So Bill goes on to say, in this way, we try to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. In other words, how am I going to behave today? And how am I going to behave tomorrow by my own standards, not feeling shame and guilt in an unhealthy way for my past behavior? Feeling healthy guilt motivates us to take responsibility, make amends, and learn from the mistake without it leading to a feeling of worthlessness or self-condemnation. Key traits include regretting your actions, making corrective action, and understanding that mistakes are human and do not define our inherent worth. A good sex life is built on mutual consent, open communication, and emotional connection, not on frequency or specific sexual acts. It involves a partner who respects your boundaries and understanding each other's desires and preferences, and a feeling of intimacy and trust. Bill says, we subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? In other words, was I only concerned with my needs and failed to consider anyone else's feelings or needs? So he brings us to pray, saying, we ask God to mold our ideals and help us to live up to them. He clearly holds the same attitude with regard to sex, that we are as powerless over these instincts as we are over our addictions. Bill said this about resentment on page 65. He was very clear about powerlessness over our poor sexual behaviors as we are over alcohol in the case of the alcoholic. So what happens when we're powerless? Bill says we pray and we ask God to mold our ideals, help us live up to them.
My idea for setting it down on.
This is a reference to step 11, praying for the knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry it out, because that is how we are built as human beings. We need to know better, then we can do better. He goes on to say, we remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good. So there is no negativity toward this, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. In the final analysis, we are responsible for our thoughts and feelings and behaviors around this. And this is very consistent with the comment stating, we, meaning AA, stay out of this controversial topic as we do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sexual conduct. He says, whatever our idea turns out to be, the Big Book has no opinion whatsoever regarding our ideals. And for our part, we must be willing to grow toward it, and it is a process. It is about progress, not perfection. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm. Again, a reminder of what is to come, the 8th and 9th step, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in doing the 8th and 9th step instructions, on dealing with infidelity. So we must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem in meditation. As he has taken us from prayer to meditation already, the prayer is for knowledge and power. And Bill says in meditation, we ask God, that is how we begin our meditation, what we should do about each specific matter. We are looking for guidance, and this was his training in meditation, as was mentioned earlier. We use meditation primarily as the tool of receiving guidance by asking the question, then listening for the answer. Keep a pen and paper next to you and write down your thoughts and feelings and any awareness of the potential answer to the right question that you have asked in prayer. The right answer will come if we want it to. If you are really open, if you really want the truth, if your intention really is to be a better person who lives by principles, and this is not just a ploy or an escape from your troubles or to get yourself out of harm's way or to please someone else. These are all great and helpful, but they are not enough because they're not the primary motives. The primary motive is to become a decent human being, to have an honest relationship with reality, and to be part of society as a recovered person. So now Bill is going to elaborate on the second theme mentioned. The first theme was common sense and balance. The second theme is about God and your relationship and getting answers. That way, God alone oversees our sex situation. Bill is a realist. God is wonderful, but may not be very accessible in a practical sense. So he says at the bottom of page 69, counsel with persons is often desirable. So talk to a priest, a minister, a rabbi, anyone trained, any professional. But he says on page 70, we let God be the final judge. You can talk to anybody you want, but some of them will be misled with information given by you. It needs rigorous honesty and transparency with yourself as well as with other people, and we aren't always ready to approach it in this way. On page 7, he says, suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Let's say something difficult happens, some occasion, for whatever reason, and Bill says, suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Would this mean we are going to use again, pick up, turn on our process addictions? Some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth because it depends on us and our motives, according to Bill. Here we are back at motive, that which drives us. If we are sorry for what we have done and have an honest desire to let God take us to better places, then we are as powerless over our behavior as we are over our addictions. So here is the big red flashing red stop sign. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink or relapse, whatever our addiction is. This is not theorizing, this is fact. Out of our experience, we realize there are only two choices if we want to stay sober. We have to stop our behaviors or suffer the consequences. If your value proposition is fidelity and you don't change your behaviors, you will get drunk or use again. That is a fact. And isn't that the last thing we want to have happen? Bill says, we are not theorizing. These are facts out of our experiences. So still on page 70, Bill says, to sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for the strength to do the right thing. And we want the power to be able to do it. If sex is very troublesome, We throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. The root cause of our anger and resentment is selfishness. The root cause of our fear and anxiety and lack of trust is selfishness. The root cause of our sexual misconducts, whatever that means to you, is a transgression of your own principles that you think should have acquired, that you think you should have acquired by this time. So the best antidote to selfishness is other-centeredness, as we have heard repeatedly throughout the big book from our unmanageability. Bill says, we think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the urge when to yield would mean heartache. So this is Bill's experience, of course. And when Bill was given to depression, which was a very, very deep and serious depression, he would go to a hospital or he'd end up in jail. He'd go and get committed to an institution, or he'd go to a meeting and he'd try to help somebody else, and his depression would lift, not completely perhaps, but it definitely became lighter and less of a burden for him to carry. So there is no universal ideal sex as it is defined by mutual fulfillment, consent, and communication between partners. So why not have the ideal partner or the ideal marriage or an ideal date? A complete variety of vision statements that would help you really get clear with you about what you are looking for, rather than this blind stumbling in the dark looking for magic, which is great, it's just not effective. Be really clear about who you are and what you are looking for. When you become the person that the partner of your ideal vision would be attracted to, you actually might have them in your life. The burden is on you, not the partner that you are trying to find. So this is the worksheet that I sent home, and this is an example of how to fill out the worksheets. And this is not my story; it's someone else's story, but it'll show you it'll tick off all the boxes. So we start with a brief history of the relationship. So I ran into him at a bar in the city that I often hang out at with friends who are on the prowl. He caught my eye when I saw his wedding ring. We crossed paths a few times, and then I introduced myself, and the chemistry was off the charts. We would rendezvous during his lunch breaks or after work for work meetings, quote unquote. He was very into me and vice versa until I wasn't anymore. I was ready to move on to a new conquest, but he wouldn't let go. He even offered to leave his wife. He never understood it was just sex. He wanted more than I could give. I didn't want a mate. I wanted fun with no commitment. He stalked me for a while, but eventually he let go. He knew the game plan. He just couldn't be free. I heard he ended up divorced after the fact. So my motives to getting involved with this man were: I am attracted to flirty married men. I don't want to be in a committed relationship, and married men fulfill that need. He was very attractive, married, and bored with his wife. He was the perfect candidate. I saw him regularly at the local pub, and I approached him, and he was very willing to pursue me. So how did the encounter or relationship begin? He approached me after a few times of my planting myself in close proximity to where him and his friends would hang out. He was very willing to flirt, but I hooked him in, and he went much further. He was very honest about being married, and I liked that, so I started meeting him secretly and regularly on his lunch breaks. What's the status now, or how did it end? So I moved on to another married man. I didn't end it properly, and he resented me and stalked me, causing him to become very bitter towards me. I don't stay after the newness and excitement wears off. excuse me, I move on to another subject, always chasing that high that a new relationship brings. I ended it after 6 months. I called him and told him I met someone new and was looking for a commitment, and he couldn't give me one. He said he would leave his wife, but I had lied about the commitment part to get rid of him, so I turned that offer down. He continued for a long period afterwards of calling, texting, and sending me token gifts. He was way more interested than I was. It was his first affair, but it was not my first time. I didn't feel guilty because I was not cheating like he was, and he didn't understand that, but I didn't care. The affair was over, and he needed to leave me alone. So that would be the top of that. That I'll put it on the next screen. That's that top. My motives for getting involved. How did the encounter relationship begin? What's the status now? So you give a little, little story in there about how it all happened. So the first question is, where had I been selfish? Well, I wanted what I wanted in the moment and didn't stop to consider the end result. Didn't care if he was married. So I'm thinking about myself. Number two, where had I been dishonest? I said I was just looking for some fun, but I wanted an escape from a poor relationship. I wasn't really into him. So I just was saying whatever he wanted to hear. Where had I been inconsiderate? I wanted him to leave his wife and family for me. I would call him for emotional support at all times of the day or night. I didn't honor his commitments. Number four, whom did I hurt? I hurt his family by disrupting his family time with my constant demands of his time, often on short notice. Number five, did I arouse jealousy? I told him I would find someone else, knowing he was hooked on me. His wife suspected something after meeting me. So, yes, there was jealousy there. I thought if I said, something that would make him jealous, I would have control over him. Did I arouse suspicion? Yes, his friends and coworkers suspected our relationship, seeing us out at restaurants together, and I enjoyed their reactions. Number seven, did I arouse bitterness? When I moved on to another affair, I didn't end it properly, and he resented me and stalked me, causing him to become very bitter towards me. So, yes. Number eight, where was I at fault? I toyed with him, putting his marriage in jeopardy. I pushed his boundaries and limits through guilting him. What should I have done instead? I should have had integrity and stayed away from him. I should have stopped before the damage was done. I should have considered the potential outcomes. So that's how it would look when you're doing your sex inventory. And this is kind of an out there one. It's not really very, I don't know, maybe it is realistic. I thought it was kind of not, but I guess this goes on
Lisa,
all
is
the time.
this second sheet the same person as the first sheet?
Yes. So the first sheet was just, it was the first three, my motives for getting involved. How did the encounter relationship begin? What's the status now? So those are three separate
Yeah,
things
but
that you think about.
in that first sheet, she never mentioned the wife. And she also, I don't remember her saying, I called him constantly, blah, blah, blah. So that's why I thought, well, maybe this is a different person
So
because,
so that's what happens when you write the story. You got your thing in mind and you're like, okay, here's the story, how this is how things happen. And then you go down that list of questions and you say, well, was I selfish? Well, gosh, I got to think about it. Was I? Where had I been dishonest? Well, was I dishonest? Well, yeah, I did. Was I inconsiderate? Yeah, he had a wife, he had a family, and I would call him up and say, show up now or this is over. And he'd run his silly
yeah,
little life.
but she only looked for married men. I mean, isn't that
Mm-hmm.
what she said?
Mm-hmm.
She only looked for sort of people who were unattainable long term.
Yes.
So this behavior, now I'm seeing what you're saying. So this behavior would have repeated itself with all the wives
Mm-hmm.
of all the men who she did this with.
Yes.
But she couldn't see it till she did this work.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you could do the first three the 3 bullet points about a bunch of different people. And then you're going to see that those stories are starting to look very familiar and very much the same as the one you've just done.
Right.
And you can ask those questions about 10 relationships that she probably did this way, because this is how she operates. This was her sex ideal. This is how she thought sex should be for her. And she felt like, well, I'm not married and I'm up front and they're the ones that are cheating, so this isn't my problem. But it is. For all those 8 or 9 reasons, it is her problem. And this is her part of the problem. His is a whole different, he's got his own inventory to go with.
Right.
But, you know, if somebody is in a committed relationship and we're pursuing them and we're being very aggressive and they're kind of breaking down and eventually going along with this, we have a huge part that played this. It's not just the guy who happens to be married that he's guilty because, oh, well, he broke his commitment or his vows. Well, this isn't what a good person would do. In either case, the husband, the married man, or this flirty girl who can't be in a commitment, so she seeks people who also can't be. Both people are wrong. But in her perspective, she's looking at it saying, well, I wasn't married, so why am I wrong? Well, you were wrong for 1 through 8. All those things that you did. There was a lot of stuff that you did. You might not have cheated on a committed spouse, but you sure did ruin another person's life through your behaviors. So you do that brief history, you do that first, and then you ask the questions about that relationship. Or you say, I had like 6 people in a row that, good Lord, they seemed the same, different face, same issues. Well, okay, so then you got to ask yourself, how does this come back to me with these questions? And it maybe we could say, okay, so let's pick a different person's personality. A woman who just likes the attention of flirting with any man. There's no sex involved at all. It's still the same problems. A flirty woman might not go out and, sneak to a hotel with a married guy, but if a woman's flirting with anybody she can, it has repercussions. It has consequences. And just because somebody might need attention and so they become flirty, that doesn't make it okay. That's not healthy. So there's going to be people that have never had an affair and think, okay, well, the sex inventory has nothing to do with me. I was never unfaithful. Or there's people I've seen in rooms have had one partner their whole entire life. They mustn't have any sex inventory to do, right? Well, no, there's a lot of stuff that comes around sex. Some women might be married to the same guy, but they're constantly trying to make them jealous because they like the attention. Or they might say, okay, I'm going to make my husband think I'm having an affair so that he treats me differently. It's about the relationship, not the sexual act. We never brought up, well, what do they actually sexually do? It doesn't matter. It's what the behaviors were, what the intentions were, what the hoped for outcomes would be. So if you are that person who hasn't had a huge sexual lifestyle, and there are a lot, especially in our older group. For myself, I married my first boyfriend, was married to him for 30 years. We divorced, and I married my second boyfriend. I don't have a huge list of men, but I have a lot of defects in my sexuality and in my relationships and in the games that we play, even with our own partner, our own married partner. There are games that we play in the relationship that harm the relationship and affect the intimacy and honesty and integrity of the relationship. So, like I said, if you feel like, okay, I didn't step out of my cube here. I didn't do anything wrong. Chances are, if you've struggled with addiction or you are married to somebody with addiction, or you were brought up in a home with addiction, these circumstances are going on. They just might not be as extreme as, I mean, I've worked with people who have had over 300 partners in their life. That's an issue. I mean, they look at it as like, well, I'm having a great time. Yeah, but that's not really healthy. That's not a healthy way to do things. And then there's people, okay, they're in a committed relationship, and when the clock strikes 12, they run. Woo, I'm out of here. I'm going to my next relationship for whatever reason. And then there's people that only like the excitement of a new relationship. So when the relationship starts to get old, like around 2 to 3 years, and the lust wears off, they're out the door looking for the next relationship. That's not healthy. So that's why we're looking at this and saying, what is my relationship to people? Yes, to the intimate relationships that we have, but also relationships in general. You could go down this whole list and be talking about a friend. It wouldn't have to be a sexual partner. Where have I been selfish with a friend, or dishonest, inconsiderate? Whom did I hurt around that relationship with a friend? So this is about relationships, because relationships in addiction are really where the dysfunction shows up. We are very dysfunctional in our relationships, whether it's our sexual relationships, our fear relationships, our resentments. All of that is about people, the people in our lives, and how the relationships don't work, or they cause us great pain, or they cause them great pain, or we stay when we should go, or we go when we should have stayed. We're very relationship handicapped, very relationship handicapped, including our friendships, sibling relationships. Most people in these rooms don't even have relationships with their siblings any longer. Not because they're just dysfunctional, but because we've grown up so dysfunctionally that as we grow older and the dysfunction grows with us, it gets to a point where we can't even be in relationships with other dysfunctional people in our own families. It doesn't work. It's too dysfunctional. So that's the point of coming to the sex inventory, or the relationship. I would prefer to call it a relationship inventory, because when people hear the word sex, it puts them off. And it especially puts off the people who have been very faithful, or married the first person they were in a relationship. They waited till their honeymoon to have sex. And they're going, I don't need a sex inventory. Okay, well, you know what? You do, because you married a guy you never even had sex with. That's different now. Most people take it for a test run to make sure they're compatible. So, even that's something you'd have to look at. Getting into a marriage where you've never been intimate with a person, that's pretty unusual, and for good reason. It's kind of an impossible situation. So rethink sex inventories if you've already done one, or you've never done one because you think it doesn't apply to you. Take sex off the table and use the word relationship instead. Because, like I said, all of these questions and the answers that you come up with will apply, and you might never even use the word sex in there. Has anyone done a sex inventory yet? Okay. Carol, how did you do with it? Did you struggle?
Sure, I did. I most certainly did.
Do you want to talk about that? You don't have to discuss the sex part of it if you don't want, but if you want to talk about why you struggled with it, it might be helpful.
Well, I struggled with it because I was just very selfish and thinking of myself and thinking of what I wanted out of it, and not being completely honest about it, being dishonest, and it was difficult for me. I I wouldn't behave that way now. I wouldn't behave that way um, with my husband now. I did many things to make my first husband very jealous,
Mhm.
and I have to own up to that. I have to take responsibility for it, and I just wouldn't do that now. I just wouldn't.
And did that change after you did a sex inventory, or had it?
No, it changed before I did the sex inventory. It was the sex inventory just validated what I had already come to my own conclusions about that, and the sex inventory just validated it.
Okay, that's good. So that's great that you learned a lot before you even got to that place.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then again, even though you had got to a place where you had changed the way you were behaving sexually, I would think that there's still questions that came up that brought out some stuff that you didn't realize was there
Oh yeah.
even
Oh,
after the fact.
that's true. Yeah, that's true. There were some things that came up that I wasn't aware of. And regarding my earlier sexual behavior before I was married, and so as far as that was concerned, yes, I had to really take a good hard look at that too. You know, why I became involved with um, certain men and yeah,
And did you see a pattern of the men?
yes, I did.
Okay. So
So
you could say they had a different face, but the circumstances were pretty equal between them.
absolutely,
Yeah. Okay.
no
That's
question.
usually the case. We
Yeah,
do tend to seek out the same personality. When we leave one, we go to the same one again because we haven't learned what it is that we need to learn in order to make different choices. It's that I didn't know that I didn't know.
absolutely.
Yeah. My grandmother used to say, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. And I used to hate when she said that. And then I realized how true it was. When you know somebody, it's a little bit easier than going off and finding another person. And it's really not finding a different person. It's finding a different face to put on that personality, which sometimes is pretty good. You just need a different thing to look at. But
Absolutely.
thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Hi, Kristen.
Hey there, everybody. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to share about the sex inventory. Um, I didn't have a lot of sexual partners. I'm kind of the old generation too of,
Mhm.
I basically have been married 35 years and have never strayed, but, I had a few encounters before that. And I guess I had to look at uh, like making amends to myself with part of my sex inventory because I realized when I was a young woman, I gave sex to get love. You know what I mean? And these were kind of like not like one night stands, but they were the kind of thing where I was really interested in this person, but I felt like the only way that this person was going to want to be with me, because the hard sell was like we want to have sex. And even though in my gut it was just like, I'm not really ready for this, or doesn't really meet my needs, and so when I look back on, when I first did a sexual inventory, it was hard for me because I thought, well, I haven't had affairs. And, so I thought about, yeah, that wasn't really healthy for me. I was such a people pleaser
Yeah.
and really, wanted to be loved. And so, I mean, and I found that so true as being a sponsor all these years. So many women give sex to get love.
Yep.
And but the thing about my marriage is I had to really look at how my eating disorder really hurt my husband and hurt our intimate life and take responsibility for that and really try to make amends, living amends, but just to validate because I was so preoccupied with my body. And it's almost like when you spend the day eating, it's like the last thing that you want to do. I mean, when my husband would get home and he's like, "Oh, I love you," and start kissing me, it'd be like, "Don't touch me," because I'm full of shame and guilt. I feel disgusting. And it really impacted, plus I had this body dysmorphia all the time. I was either fat or, I mean, I just was so preoccupied that it took the passion away and it made my husband feel rejected. because he's like, I don't care. You're beautiful to me no matter what. And I couldn't hear that. And after a while, he just quit asking. And I'm lucky because he was the kind of person that, the kind of work he did too. He's on the road, and he was an F-15 fighter pilot in the Air Force and went all these air shows, and women were just throwing themselves at him. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, I mean, I'm so blessed that my husband is just not that. He's just Mr. Integrity to a T. And I am so lucky because I kind of set him up in a position that it would have been hard not to. Because here you have a wife who's just not interested. And it wasn't that I didn't love him, but I was so wrapped up in myself and my fear and my just self hatred. I mean, I really hated myself for a long period in my addiction. And it's hard to be intimate with somebody when you hate yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
So
how did you remedy the situation? You did the sex inventory and you came to some realizations. Where did you go from there and how did you heal it?
Well, I mean, I think I'd been doing some of that stuff beforehand because, being in therapy and just working on, I guess to tell you the truth, Lisa, I've been in 12-step program for a really long time. And I didn't leave the rooms, but I kind of went searching, kind of like we talked about last week. I got involved in Course in Miracles and a lot of different things and a lot of work with some of these teachers about self-compassion. And that was so integral and self-forgiveness to my recovery because I realized for me, shame is at the core of my spiritual malady, just deep shame.
Yeah.
And so I really had to work on healing that shame. And so in the process of that, it was like making a living amends to my husband and also just validating his sadness, his anger, his grief, his, all those things. And even though it's been healed, and it's hard now because I have an illness that, makes it difficult, complicated. I mean, it's just, but it's like I let my husband vent because sometimes he just needs to be heard. And I think it's hard when we feel a lot of guilt that I realized I used to be defensive and I'd make all these excuses. And he's like, Kristen, I just need to feel heard. I'm pissed. It hurts. This is not what I thought my marriage would be like, all these kinds of things. And I felt so bad. I couldn't hear it, but it didn't give him the opportunity to be validated and to feel heard. And so I feel like the biggest gift, and I still try to be that way, like with my illness there are days it's like, I didn't sign up for this. This sucks. I mean, I hate this. It's not like saying I hate you, but
Right.
because I had so much shame, I always heard it as like, I hate you and you're the bad person. And so it's been a really long journey of, not taking responsibility. It's that idea that I'm not guilty, but I'm responsible.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
it's really helpful. So I guess, anybody who hasn't done one, if, for me, it doesn't have to be this traditional, because I think for a lot of men, and back in the 30s, I mean, a lot of alcoholic men, I mean, that was the deal. They were out there philandering with their, on their wives and having all these relationships. And so I think a lot of women in program have struggled that didn't have that kind of issue. But especially with eating disorders, I have just found that so many people have, the issue of just how it affected their own sexual life throughout their lives, even not even just with their marriages, but how it really affects our partners. And, how do we forgive ourselves and then make that living amends?
Yeah. That's
So,
great.
yeah. So anyway, just wanted to share that if it's helpful to anybody.
Oh, great share. Thank you.
Process. It's really it's a day by day process. It really, really is. So,
And a lot of women have that feeling of I need to get love from a man, and the way I'm going to get it is through sex,
right.
because we know that's what makes them happy, but it doesn't necessarily make them love us. It's a separate category. There's love, and then there's sex, and then sometimes they combine. But as women, we went out and we were taught, go find a man that'll love you and make sure you make him happy. That's really the message that we got, and it ended up hurting us as women. No offense to the men in the room, it's just especially like before women's lib, so much was different especially about the sexual relationships. And women have come so far that they've become an equal partner with men. Women are as promiscuous now as men are, and that those statistics were never that way until probably the last 10 or 20 years. Women are not behaving like they used to. They're behaving more like men. So, and the thing that is important to remember is that when people are using, their inhibitions are removed. So I hate to say poor sexual behavior, but the sexual behavior that goes on when people are using is very, very big. It's a huge issue, because some of them don't even remember doing it. It's just part of that center in the brain that says, okay, you know what, game on, and they're not in their right mind. So it is very prevalent in addiction, the sexuality part, that it destroys a lot of people.
And for women to heal from that shame, because I've a lot of the people that I've sponsored that are also in AA, and they said, they felt like a whore, and they really were. I mean, the things that they did and how they let themselves be violated, because they were drunk or they were trying to get drugs. And so they did any means to get drugs. And, it's so hard to heal that deep shame from that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's really core.
Yeah, when you're done doing these sheets, you might want to go back and look at your answers and look at who you were when this was going on and how much compassion that person will need. Because people don't do these things because they feel good about themselves. They do these things because they're in pain and they don't feel that they're lovable or whatever their issue is. So looking at these, and we look at our answers and say, wow, look at where I was coming from. I was in a really bad place. It's not an excuse. It's just a fact that we've been in bad places, and people in bad places do bad things. It goes hand in hand. But I would recommend looking at your list and looking at your answers with a huge amount of compassion for the person that came out of whatever you were in and survived it. Because it's a really hard thing to come out of. Anyone else want to share about their inventory? Any guys want to put a guy thing into this? Go ahead, Sarah.
I just want to, I'm also, I'm one who's been married for a very long time. And I've done the 12 steps several times. And each time we got to the sex part, I thought it doesn't really apply. I have not really had any affairs. Anyway, but several years back, one of the facilitators group said anyone, it was a man, and he would say, anyone in the room who's been married, been in a relationship for more than 20 years, you have to look at this, you have to redo the sexual inventory. And I thought, okay. And I started looking at my marriage, but what you said tonight, it's really, now I really look at it as my relationship as a woman. I've had a career, I'm retired now, and how my thinking and my approach to reality in terms of my sexuality really has changed from when I was an adult and in my adolescent 20s. And I came into sexual maturity before the pill. After the pill, things changed completely.
Oh, yeah.
And even now, so that I really have changed. And it's I thought part of it is forgiving myself, I think. But I lived at a different time, and I reacted when I was younger out of fear.
Right.
Like so many of my friends were getting pregnant. They didn't want to marry and nobody was going to do that to me. And I just kind of withdrew. And then later on, I met my husband. We've been together more than 50 years. And I haven't had any other, so I thought, well, the sex thing doesn't apply to me. I haven't had a lot of sexual partners. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. but my relationships as a female working and having a career, it changed in terms of how I related not only to men but to other women and how I valued myself. So it all ties in really with my sexuality, really my sexual approach and my sexual orientation. And so it does. For years, I thought, oh, this one doesn't apply to me, but it really does. If you turn, I love what you say that you consider it a relationship inventory
Yeah.
as opposed to sex. I appreciate that because I really agree with you about that.
Yeah, or even, an intimacy inventory,
Mm-hmm.
because when we as damaged people get into intimate relationships, we bring a lot of bad baggage with us. And even if it's just one relationship, we still bring all that baggage into that relationship, and it makes a lot of damage happen.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us pick damaged people, so it's coming in from both sides. It's amazing we survive what we go through. I mean, I think for a long time people just didn't divorce because it wasn't acceptable, but there was so much damage that we've done to each other.
And to the families.
Yeah, I remember when I met my first husband when I was 17. I was engaged at 17. When we had our 17th anniversary, he said to me, "Who do you think did more damage to you, your parents or me?" Yeah. And I said, "I think you, because you were aware and they weren't." But
Mm-hmm.
that, we come out of a damaged situation and then we try to have intimate relationships, and it's a huge struggle. And some people, the reason they go off and do these hookups and one night stands and all that is because they can't be intimate. It's part of the damage that's been done to them. And it's not an excuse. It's just that's what goes on in the world, and that's what we have to deal with. Go ahead, Rochelle.
It's just thinking, I mean, I'm in my late 70s, and when I went, my mother never said a word to me about anything, aside from handing me Tampax and saying, you're going to have your. And I was with my son and my grandchildren, and I was talking to my son, and he said, "Oh, and he was taking my grandson, and he said, yeah, I'm going to get a vasectomy." And I said, my immediate reaction was, "Are you saying that in front of my 13-year-old grand?" He goes, "He knows everything." And the difference is that they talk to the children about everything, and about relationships, and about feelings, and about sex, and about this, having intercourse, and whatever. Nothing was, I just remember my high school health class, and the teacher said, be like the hummingbirds or something, mate only once. And yes, go off into the world, and meet men. And I'm thinking, what the hell did that mean? How was that? If I meet a hummingbird, I know what to do. But it is amazing how ill prepared we were for
Yeah,
relationships, for
that's right.
anything. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm really, really grateful that I see kids now that they're at least able to talk to a parent or talk to some adult. And because we didn't, I'm sure Sarah, you would say the same. We didn't talk to anybody
Absolutely.
about. We didn't
Yeah,
know.
that's
We
right.
didn't even know the questions to ask. So
Yeah.
No, we didn't. And a lot of our information came from older siblings, or in my case, it was the most promiscuous girl. She would give everybody the information. She'd be like, "Well, I know what's going to happen. This is the deal. This is what you want to look for." So that's where we got our information. I mean, and I'll bet all of us were in health class where they taught the birds and the bees, but I don't think any of us walked out of there understanding a damn thing about it. And our parents, it was taboo. You didn't talk about it. It was a closed door. No, we don't talk about this. So, that in itself is a dysfunction, because we didn't know what was proper or wasn't proper. Or what do you mean we have a choice? We can have a choice. We don't have to do whatever our husband says. We didn't know that. And that's changed women and men and relationships, that people are now understanding that there is information and that there are preferences and that we do have a voice and we can stand up and say, no, I don't like what's happening. We still might not, because we're still on that damage where you don't speak, you don't say what's bothering you, you don't ask for your preferences because you're too busy people pleasing. That's what our parents taught
Oh, yeah.
us.
That's,
You
yeah.
know, you married
Yeah.
him, you do what he tells you.
Mhm.
What horrible information to give a daughter. I would never tell my children that now, but that was the norm. It wasn't good, it wasn't right, but it was the norm. Nancy. Nancy, are you there?
Oh, okay.
Hey, Bob.
Great conversation. Thank you. Um, Lately, I've been talking with my girlfriends about how our mothers, we were born in the 50s, so our mothers were Victorian women who
Mhm.
only stayed home.
Exactly.
They did not leave
Mhm.
the home to get conversation. They went to church, but
Mhm.
everything with church women was, above board.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the truth very often because they were trying to, be better than their neighbors
Exactly.
in many areas. Look good. And so uh, my grandmother was never told what sex was before she got married, and she didn't know. She was the oldest daughter, and so she did share with my mom that, and that's the only thing my mother shared with me was that grandma didn't know what it was. And, it was just so, there were no words, there was no conversation, there was no, you know, I, for myself, I believed sex was love because that's what was portrayed in the movies of the 50s.
Yep.
Troy Donahue and Debbie Reynolds or something. And he just seems so in love with her, and they had a physical relationship. I just thought that was what love was.
Yep.
And just how we were misled because nobody had conversation with us.
Mhm.
But then we all, many of us went to college and we learned about different cultures, about different families, about, all sorts of things that from our little tiny high schools we never were introduced
Yep.
because, yeah. So anyway, I just think the more hidden a conversation was, the more intimacy problems everyone
Mhm.
had. And I can't even imagine the boys. I can't imagine the issues the boys were having. So,
Right, because at least girls would, tell each other stuff and tell secrets and share information. I don't know how
yeah, yeah.
how the guys are. Lonnie, do you want to speak to this issue? You're the one guy on screen.
Oh, sure, sure. Why not? The interesting thing is, I'm not quite sure how women understand how driven testosterone makes guys.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like it,
Yeah.
it has no rationality to it. Once it's funny. I look at my grandson now, he's 12, and I'm just waiting for his hormones to change. It's like it's going to be a shock to him. It's like because it was a shock to me. Yeah, it's like you're innocent. You don't think you have friends who are girls, and all of a sudden you have this drive that you don't understand. Uh, and you can't control. And other boys, you make jokes about it. You laugh about it because everybody's insecure about it. And you really don't know what to do with it. And it just drives you uh, basically to have very you know, you won't quite say selfish, but it is a hormonal driven response that you just can't control very well. And I think that's pretty normal for all guys. It just happens. Uh, if you're lucky, I think you're able to get some direction with it, but it still doesn't stop the hormonal drive. I mean, it's just there. I think perhaps with women, there may be some of it in the sense of wanting a maternal response, but it's not nearly the same as uh, the drive. The testosterone just drives you to the act. It doesn't make any difference about the relationship. It's the act. And then you may think about the relationship after. But it's
So
and
when you experienced that, did you go and ask somebody, or did you just decide I'm just gonna do this on my own? Did you feel like, oh, I'm gonna talk to my dad or my mom or
well,
a teacher?
unfortunately, I was raised very religiously, and you didn't talk about anything like that. And in
Yeah.
fact, I didn't have sex until I was in my 20s. It was obviously there was a lot of fantasy, masturbation, things that were self-directed, but you couldn't really have a relationship and have a religious upbringing. That was like so you had a lot of conflict there, and I think most of my relationships after I became sexually aware had some a lot of conflict because of that. And yet, believe me, I was a child of the 60s, so you know, definitely oh yeah, let the love child it was in the 60s were drugs and free love. It was like all sorts of weird things.
Oh yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
and keep me out of Vietnam.
They don't call it the baby boom for nothing.
That's right.
It was a boom, all right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I
so
appreciate your comments. That's
well, it's sort of weird because I'm not quite sure how women realize how the testosterone drives men. I mean, they say, yeah, well, you guys are just horny. It isn't just an attitude. It literally is a physical uh, response. It's like you think it's mental until you realize it. You look back and you go, no, it's actually there's a physical response to testosterone, and as I say, I can't wait to see my grandson change. From an innocent 12-year-old, I can't wait to see how he turns out at 13 or 14, even though he's a wonderful young man. And he has lots of friends who are girls. He just doesn't see girls as anything other than just friends, just like guys. And it'll be
it
interesting to
must be
see.
an amazing experience for a boy when that moment happens where he has these thoughts that are coming out of his newfound sexuality. It must just blow their minds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, how did I get here with this beautiful girl that was my friend, and now I want to, drag her down the stairs by her hair?
Well, and there's a period where you don't know which sex is preferable.
Wow.
It's like, believe me, early adolescence, you don't know, is it girls or maybe guys, or is it just having sex? It's like, okay, you just have to get off somehow, and you're not really sure. You're not identifying yet as to what you really want to be.
Wow.
It actually, even though too many people uh, think guys are being crude and joking about it. It's joking because they're totally freaked out about it.
Oh yeah, I would imagine.
It's like you joke about things you're not comfortable with.
Mm.
Very
And the
true.
biggest joke is, yeah, I'm not comfortable. It's about sex or death. It's like those two things. Taxes, we're not going to worry about yet.
Yeah, they're
Not,
inevitable.
not earning any money, but I can remember as an adolescent, two things, yeah, sex and death. Those are the things you worry about.
Wow. See, women don't have to worry about sex.
No,
That's not
no,
what
it's
we're trying
not.
to get to. We're trying to
No,
make our house and put you in it and make sure you're not out wandering because your testosterone's off the charts.
right, and that's what I'm trying to emphasize is that there's a drive there that is not, I won't say uncontrollable, but it is definitely not an intent. It's like there is a physical hormonal problem of adolescence that,
So
Huh.
you're not,
that women
there's
don't
no,
have, I don't believe. Not quite the same.
Yeah,
there's no thinking going on.
Right.
not a
You think
thought.
There's
all you
no
want, you can't
thinking.
control it.
Okay.
Hey, Lisa,
Wow.
I just wanted to thank, and I can't remember your name because it's not listed up there, the gentleman that just spoke.
Oh,
Oh,
Lonnie.
Lonnie, thank you so much for sharing that. And I mean,
Yeah.
this is really
Yeah.
personal, but
Yes.
I wanted to share I have a muscle wasting disease, and they put me on a medication years ago that had a lot of testosterone, and they were just, I mean, it was totally experimental. And I swear to God, when what you're talking about as a woman, I mean, I never had sex dreams in my life. I mean, my sex drive, I thought, holy, I mean, it was amazing. And so it helped me with my relationship with my husband and with men in general, because, you know, I am a therapist and I have dealt with, I used to work with, I did my master's thesis on teenage pregnancy prevention. And boy, I wish I'd had the knowledge of, like you said, that it's this drive in boys that it made me love them rather than go, why can't men just keep it in their pants? What the hell's wrong with them? You know, because
Yeah.
I would feel really intolerant because you know, these women would come in pregnant, you know, and all these guys, you just, you know, use them and leave them, but yet they're not guilty because, like you said, it is just this crazy drive that is not explainable, that is all you think about. And until I experienced that as an adult woman being on testosterone myself, that it was like, wow. So I really appreciate you just expanding on it too. I mean, how it's sure with religious upbringing, you're so conflicted by
Yeah.
these normal natural drives, and then you've got this guilt and shame that go along with it. How the heck do we have, you know, healthy relationship with sexuality? It makes it challenging.
And there have been studies recently that have indicated that some amount of testosterone given to women really does increase their sexual drive.
It does.
It really does.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, who knew, right? And, but I think it would help women be more compassionate. It did me big time. That men, it's not like you guys just, you know, why can't you control yourselves? It is a drive
Yeah.
that is really uncontrollable. And it can be, you know, overwhelming, I'm sure, as a young man and confusing. So, yeah. So I really appreciate your candor. It was so, so
Oh,
helpful.
thank you.
You know, it's too bad that they wouldn't take that information and go into like the high schools and explain that. I'm in my 60s and nobody explained that to me like you did, Lonnie. That's amazing to me. You know,
And
when
you know,
I think
part
of
of the
sex drive,
problem,
I didn't think it was actually driven to, you know, do it no matter what. I didn't think of it that way.
yeah, it's sort of funny because I remember a home and family living in high school, and you know, I mean, everybody joked about that stuff because nobody wanted to be serious about it. It's the same thing. Why guys, you know, tell obscene jokes? It's like it's because they don't want to talk about the truth as to how it is affecting them. So you joke about it. You know,
Right.
it's like,
Mhm.
Right.
but if you really got serious about it, guys would sort of say, "Yeah, I'm sort of scared to death about this drive that is really present."
Oh, that's good to know. I'm going to spend Thanksgiving with my grandson who just went through puberty, and I'm going to be watching him like a hawk. I want to see how different he is because I haven't seen him since his voice changed and everything. So
Great.
that'll be funny.
Yeah.
Good to know.
We'll see if he wants to talk to grandma.
He usually does, but this might be a different visit. Um, so does anyone have any questions or concerns about any of the worksheets or any of these inventories that we're doing? I do want to remind you, there is no finish line here. There's no deadline. Whatever you're working on, just keep working on it. You know, you attend the workshop. You don't have to be at the same spot that the workshop is on. Oh, this workshop is a continuum. It just keeps running. It just keeps going. When they get to the top, we come back and go back down again. So if you're not feeling like you're caught up, you don't have to be caught up paperwork wise or homework wise. Just get what you can out of the actual meeting. And then you go back and you fill it in. And each time you go through the 12 steps again, because it's not a one and done. Each time you go through, you'll have less and less to do when it comes to the inventories. So at some point, you're going to be totally caught up each time because you've already done so much work and you got a lot of it out of the way. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not where you guys are at. I can't get caught up. I give up. Do not do that. It takes as long as it takes. There is no finish line. There's no end. Even when you think you've gotten to a place where, wow, I've done all this, I've learned all this, you're still going to learn more. It's impossible to finish. So don't be discouraged if you're like, oh my God, but this is the fourth step. This is a very heavy duty step. There's a lot here. There's writing, there's questions. There's a lot of deep diving. Don't be concerned. Don't be concerned at all. Just do what you can. Attend the meetings so you get the actual information, and do it at whatever pace you're doing it at, because that's where you need to be at. That's where you're comfortable. This, you're not passing this work in. I'm not grading anybody. I'm not saying, oh, what do you mean you haven't done this? The last time I did Herb's workshop, I didn't even write anything down. I just attended the workshops, and that's all I did. I didn't do any of the homework. I got to that point, and you do get to that point. But then things change in your life, and you have to do. I had an incident with my brother last night, who I haven't spoken to in a while, and he was at my mother's house, and he got on her phone, and he was just off the charts, and I got pulled into it, and now I have another resentment I got to work on, and who knew? I thought I was done with him, but I'm not, because I got so pulled in. So, it happens. We're human. And when you think you're done, you're not. So please do not feel any pressure about where you're at. Just do what you're doing right now. You're doing it exactly when you're supposed to. If you're still on step 2, do step 2. Do it to the best of your ability. You'll catch up, or you won't. It doesn't matter, because it will come around again. It's an ongoing discovery. This is the best way to discover what's going on in your life and why your life is or isn't working at any stage. And anytime there's a big change in your life, even if it's a positive change, a lot of that old stuff comes back. We feel out of sorts. Our safety net comes back, even though it's negative. We call it back in because it's familiar. So there's always work to be done. This should not be a stressful thing for anybody. It should be a discovery and really nothing more. So everyone enjoy the time off. Two classes, 2 in a row. Don't forget. If you want to get caught up, get caught up. If you want to just enjoy the holiday and your family, then do that. Whatever's best for you. That's what Thanksgiving is about. And if you have any questions, I'm not going to be off the planet. I will still be around. You can always send me an email and let me know whatever you're struggling with, and I can try to get you through it. So if no one else has any questions or comments.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mark.
So, so we're supposed to do, I believe, like you said, 10 fears. Is that correct? Or just until we're done and then like 10 resentments? Is that like the gist?
Yeah. So the recommendation is to do about 10, and you take your top 10, the real zingers, the shark bites, because when you do those 10, you're going to see patterns. And once you grasp the patterns, the rest of the ones that you didn't put on your list are going to become very evident, and you don't have to formally do them, say, for instance, in a worksheet. So yeah, take your top 10. If you've had a lot of issues and you want to do 20, do 20. It's not a rule. It's just you want to stay as pinpoint focused as you can on the issues and not get off on a tangent of different people or situations or activities that might be bringing up these feelings. You really want to stay focused on the solutions. And when we start really getting into, oh, I'm going to do 30 or 40, 50. I was working with a person who was doing 100. And I was like, you're spending so much time doing the 100, you're really not getting the information down. You've spread it too thin. So 10 really gets you there, and you take your 10 hardest ones, or the people that really mess with you, or the instances or fears or feelings, you really take your top 10 and apply the information. If you're still struggling, you surely can add another 10 until you see the pattern and you realize where the work is leading that you're doing, because it does come to a conclusion. And the conclusion is pretty much going to be the same. And you'll get there. You'll realize, now I understand I am coming up with the same conclusion every time. Because it's your pattern. We all have our patterns. And the work is about finding those patterns and eliminating them so that we can live a freer life. We can live in the joy that we were born to live in. That's what we were put on the earth for, is to experience joy. So if you're struggling with a lot of resentments or fears, sexual things, that joy cannot come out. So we want to eliminate all this crap that we've created and experience the joy. Because joy just comes. You don't have to do any work. But we've put up all these crazy barriers so we can't get to that joy. So that's what this work is about. Getting rid of the riffraff so we can get to the real good stuff that we were put on the planet for before it's too late. Because this is not a dress rehearsal. This is the real deal. We want to get there in this lifetime because we don't know what comes after this. So let's get it. We'll get it going, get it great, and really enjoy our lives with a sense of freedom. So if anyone would want to do the serenity prayer, you can unmute yourselves. We can do it together. So God, please grant me the serenity to accept the things
I cannot change, courage to change
things I
things
can,
I can,
and
and the wisdom to know
know
the
the
difference.
Difference. Thanks.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Have a
Thanksgiving,
nice
and I'll
holiday.
see you after the turkey lands.
Happy holiday.
Have a great trip.
Thank you. Thank you. Everyone enjoy your families if you're being with good family members.
Thank you.
If not,
Bye-bye.
have a short visit. Good night, everyone.
Good night.